Everybody, thanks for watching. We're here in the Utah Air Guns booth at Hunt Expo. I got Ryan McMillan here from Grayboe. Known Ryan for a long time. I was just talking to one of my friends, Dustin Coleman of Coltac, and I said, you know, it came to me the other day. One of the first big podcasts that I did was your dad's, which kind of
talking stock or something.
Yeah, when your dad released that, you know, Kelly McMillan, when he released that, I came on. And that's when I first met your dad, and then I had a deep respect for him after that. I remember when I'd go down to McMillan, because I worked for McMillan for a little bit, having conversations with him about conservation and everything. Like, I don't think anybody ever saw the side of him that had that, but I don't know. Yeah, just something interesting to think about. But anyway, so if anybody watching, Grayboe, great stock company, you kind of rolled out and decided to change the view on stocks and everything, how everything is kind of built. Kind of go over with me, since I've never had you on the podcast, go over with me. What was the brainchild behind Grayboe? Like, what was the direction you wanted to go with stocks?
Well, so I started, working with my dad after I got out of the military. The McMillan Fiberglass Stocks has been around since 1973. So I kind of grew up. I mean, I'm born in 1979. So I grew up in, with my dad and my grandfather talking about this. So I've been around it forever, and joined my dad, in 2006 or so when I got out of the military. And we did a bunch of things. We did McMillan Firearms, and we did, I was kind of adjacent to the McMillan Fiberglass Stocks company, but I watched him and how the stock company, I just felt like there was a more efficient way to be able to make stocks. Now, in 1973, when my grandfather started, it was pretty revolutionary what they were doing, but by the mid 2010, 2010 or so, like, there was a lot of things that you could see change. And for my dad, I think he's getting older, really didn't want to spend the money or the risk of change, making a major change in a process, because that process had worked for so long, the manufacturing process. And so I just thought there was an opportunity to go after a certain set of the market that McMillan couldn't go after, because their stocks were really just custom one at a time. And I thought there was a bigger opportunity for maybe some OEMs and customers who wanted a lower price stock, high quality, lower priced, that didn't have as much customization. It was more like off the shelf product. So that's what we went after with Grayboe. And really what we had to figure out right off the bat was, how do we make these stocks in a way that's efficient? And even though the customer doesn't really necessarily see that from the beginning, that was something we had to accomplish as a company, to figure out how to make, stocks much more efficiently, so that, they could either go through distribution or get put on, a rifle at Savage or at Winchester. And that was really the genesis, I think, of Grayboe. And it's morphed into some different things since then, but that was, for the most part, that's our core belief, is trying to make stocks more efficiently, with as many features as possible, but with a price point that's really reasonable, and good distribution margins for, so that we can sell through distribution and we can spread the product out as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times I ever walked into McMillan, and I saw all these ladies in the back mold room, and they were just constantly just laying stuff in, and I'm like, holy, I don't think anybody understood or realized how intricate the McMillan stocks were. And I saw that when I first walked in. I'm like, holy crap, each one of these stocks takes hours and hours and hours to build. And I'm like, I wonder if he's charging enough to do it for the amount of man hours that he's got. I wonder if, and so I saw that, there's a lot of stock companies kind of coming and going, and it's hard, because the stock itself still kind of looks the same. The feel kind of is the same, but you guys kind of changed the way with the composites that you guys do stuff. Now, are you guys mostly injection molded, or?
The whole process is, we designed and developed. It's not an injection molded. Okay. It's what would be more commonly referred to as transfer molding, which most people have no idea what that means, but it gets into the weeds, and I don't want to get too far into this because people will get bored, but when you think of injection molding, that's a plastic. That's a plastic process term. When you think of like an epoxy-based material, like a thermoset, for people who know what that is, there's different terms you use. So transfer is one of them, compression molding is another, layup. There's all kinds of different ways to think about it. But Basically what it is putting the material under extreme pressure in a mold, extreme pressure and heat. And there's a number of different ways to do that. So that's what we do. And that's what we developed. Whereas at McMillan, it was more of a hand laid up. There wasn't a whole lot of pressure involved because there was no mechanical, there was nothing mechanical pressurizing that stock. It was just like laying stuff up in it. And we took that process to a totally different level. And figured out along the way how to do it in a much more efficient way. The stocks are stronger. There's not like the whole thing's homogeneous. With a traditional fiberglass stock, you have a shell, and then which is different than the inside. Ours is totally through and through 100%.
Okay.
The same.
And I know I've seen it a lot of times. You guys say that your stock is one of the only ones that doesn't have to be bedded, right?
Well, what we found over the years, and I can't speak for any other stock company, but there's a couple things to say about that. What we found over the years is that our customers who have used this have come back to us and said, we are seeing no changes in bedding versus non-bedding. Now, there may be at the very top end, there may be something to where like a gunsmith or someone who's wanting to get the absolute most out of their rifle will bed it. But, rifle stocks are becoming more and more accurate. Actions are becoming more and more accurate off the machines, and the mating surfaces are much better than they used to be. Now, if you have like a Remington 700 action that's just not very concentric, that might be something you want to bed. But if you have got like kind of a custom action like a Lone Peak or a Defiance, like those things will shoot just right in the raw stock basically. And the other thing about the stock, the reason why ours I think is better than our competitors is because most of our competitors are machining in their inlets. So when you machine in an inlet, there's a lot more room for error. With our inlets are molded in, which means that they're the same every single time. And so we use the same tool every time we make a stock. So that tool produces the same exact stock basically every single time. So there's no variation from what we do versus a machined inlet where there can be variation from stock to stock.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, and I mean, we've all talked about tolerance stack, between you've got your rail, your scope, your rail, your action, your stock, and that is a problem. I keep seeing a lot more of these stock companies where you almost guarantee to have to bed them. And then I've seen it recently where like a lot of the mini chassis, depending on the action, especially, still have to be skim bedded because there's just too much variance in the actions. And I think that does say a lot about Grayboe is kind of going where it's an exact fit every single time.
We didn't know, like when we started, like the whole reason why we went to a molded in inlet was for that efficiency, and it wasn't necessarily to try to create something that was more accurate than, let's say, a machined in inlet. It just so happened that because they're more consistent, because it's used with the same tool, it's molded with the same tool every time, we started getting feedback from whether it's just individual customers or even big OEMs who are like, dude, these are the most consistent stocks that we've ever bought. And it's because when they get them, they're the same every time. When they're not machined, you have so much variation, and that causes accuracy issues, or can. And so we just don't see those very often. I will say, as a stock maker, one of the complaints we get the fewest is that this thing doesn't shoot. As a matter of fact, I don't know if we ever get that. It's just not a complaint we get, just because of the way we make the stock.
And a lot of that could be on the builder of the rifle itself, because we all know there's a lot of guys that screw stuff together and sell them, and I mean that is hard, but it makes it easier for, I think, in my opinion, those newer manufacturers that are out there trying to start a gun company or trying to do things, and they've got this super simple way, because in a lot of stocks where you do have to bed and you do have to do all this extra stuff, you've got to train somebody to go through and do all that. So it is one of those things that saves a lot of time. Now, you've come out with some, it seems like this is the thing lately, is everybody's got to have the lightest freaking thing they can have, right? What are your lightweight rifle lineups compared to, how do you break them out? What are your hunting stocks? So if somebody comes to you and say, hey, I want to hunt, what are your stocks that you want to point them towards?
We have 4 hunting stocks. We have 2 of what I would kind of consider kind of your base model, where they're not as many features. They're just simple, light, and really well priced. So that would be the Trekker and the Eagle. We try not to overlap products like that. The Eagle and the Trekker both have really the same function, but they're very differently designed.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we try to think about developing product, we try not to have two in the same category because it's kind of redundant, but because it's this lightweight kind of base model product, it's a very high volume product. So we wanted two different models. So on one end, the Trekker, it's like a totally unique stock.
Mm-hmm.
We designed it specifically to be as light as we could. And in doing so, we basically have hogged out the entire butt area. If you turn the stock upside down, the whole thing looks like a taco, basically,
mm-hmm.
like a taco shell.
Yeah.
Because that was the way we make stocks. That was the most efficient way to get the weight out, because the butt's typically big, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
you don't need all that material in there, and it's a lot of weight. So that was the best way to do it. It's also got a vertical pistol grip, which is a little bit unique compared to most traditional hunting stocks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Trekker. And then we have the Eagle. They're both priced at the same exact spot, I think right around $500 retail. And then the Eagle is a little bit more traditional. I wouldn't call it a swoop pistol grip or a grip, but it's an angled grip. A lot like you would maybe feel on an M4, like
mm-hmm.
a traditional M4, very similar to that. And that one has a little bit more traditional lines. The whole buttstock's intact. Now, because of the way we make stocks, again, everything we do, the way we make stocks light is by its geometry, not necessarily by putting in lightweight fill or anything like that. We try to make it. We want it the strongest fill we can get, but we counter that with the geometry that we put into that we design the stock with. And so anyway, the Eagle is just different than the Trekker. So you get a more traditional stock with the Eagle, and the Trekkers that's a little bit more wild for the people who want something, who are okay with, a little bit different.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw it, I'm like, wow, that's complete. Like, it's one of those that just grabs your attention because like, crap, hope half the stock's missing. Like, where in the heck is it? But
right.
So you're not having any issues with braking. You're not having any issues.
That might be the strongest stock we have, and it's just because the way that it's designed, you've got these two beams really running down the back. I mean, it's strong. It's
Mm-hmm.
strong for what it is, and so no, like we don't have, and our material is super strong. It's hard to explain on a podcast when I don't have like props,
Mm-hmm.
but the way we make stocks with the material formulation that we have, we press it in so hard, we get all the air bubbles out. The material's densely packed with fiber. And so you don't need a huge cross section of material to make it strong. You need a thin cross section. So that's why you see all of our stocks have some kind of lightning, geometric lightning areas in them. So even like the Phoenix, which is kind of our higher end stock with the most features, the butt area is thinned out quite a bit. It's recessed a lot, unlike other stocks you might see, just because that's how we go about getting the lightest stock we can.
And I know you sent me an Eagle. I've done some stuff with it. I need to get back into it. I got sidetracked when I bought the last company, and I've kind of been off on a tangent, but now I'm finally off to where I can do it. So I've got to get some more stuff done with it. But does the Eagle come, I can't remember, does it come adjustable?
Well, we have the Eagle and the Eagle Pro. So the Eagle is just base model, excuse me. The Eagle has really no adjustment. The Eagle Pro is the one that does have adjustment. So that's got adjustable cheek piece, flush cups. It's got, so that's basically the upgrade from the Eagle to the Eagle Pro is the adjustable cheek piece and the flush cups.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagle just has the standard 3 sling swivels, no cheek piece adjustment. However, both of them do have length of pull adjustment.
Oh, okay.
So that's a big deal, especially if you're a bigger guy. You need more spacers. And we try to keep that simple. We just have a simple spacer system. It works. It's really effective. It's not super expensive. It's not super elaborate. It's just basic. But it seems to work really well, and people like it. And so we stick with it. Try not to overcomplicate things too, in the business with products. Like it's easy to overcomplicate things, and then you run into production issues or issues with stuff that's more mechanical. So we try to keep it simple where we can.
Right. It just gives more things to fail in most cases, So if you've got precision style stocks, what, like for those guys that are just going out shooting on the weekends, they want something built for maybe even competition. What are your guys' stocks in that general area?
So the two that we had were called the Renegade and the Ridgeback. We ended up discontinuing those. We made a lot of changes this year. We started, the older a stock gets, the older the molds get, the harder they get to make a good product right out of the mold. So when you get to a point to where your molds start getting old, you really need to start to look at either upgrading, like when we went from the Phoenix to the Phoenix 2, or you discontinue or do something. We were at a point where we needed to make some changes in the company, like some directional changes. We discontinued the Ridgeback and the Renegade, but we're relaunching those products here. At least the Renegade 2 will come out probably in April. And then we're launching a stock called the Core. And that's kind of, I wouldn't say a direct replacement for the Ridgeback, but close. So the Core will be, will have, it'll be your kind of mid-range competition stock. It won't be like your $1,500, all the bells and whistles chassis that you see. It'll be kind of more like the middle range where it's a composite stock. It's got a lot of really good solid features, which a lot of people like. A lot of people don't like going all the way to the $1,500 price range or the $2,000 price range. They get all these, they don't need all of that stuff. And a lot of that stuff, like you said, ends up causing problems with the stock. Things fail. You've got aluminum in there. You've got the tinging when you shoot. So this is kind of our mid-range stock. I think it'll be a really good seller. It's a good looking stock. And when you come over to my booth, we'll show you. We got it in the back. It'll launch in April. We've already got prototypes, 3D printed prototypes. We should have the first stock out of the mold in 2 weeks, and then we'll probably launch it a month after that. It takes us about a month to get our everything ready for launch.
Right. And just so you guys and gals that are listening, a lot of people are like, "Oh, why don't you just build a new mold?" Molds are freaking expensive.
$100,000 every time we do a new product. It costs us $100,000 to launch a new product.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. It can't just be done overnight. And granted, you guys are kind of moving and you're evolving. That's what I had another person on this morning of the staleness that is within the industry. Like, and your dad built a great product, but kind of coming back to that, like this is how we build it and this is the only way we build it, instead of trying to design and trying to move forward. And anymore, with the way competition has pushed people with like shooting competitions and everything else, like the industry just in the last couple of years has evolved so freaking much. And you've got to constantly be doing that. But what everybody needs to understand is that costs a lot of freaking money to try and stay in front of everything.
Well, what you're saying right now is the exact reason I wouldn't say you don't really we didn't trap ourselves. We got at a point where we felt like we were going to be trapping ourselves in production. And so I'll kind of take a couple minutes and go through what we did. We were getting to the point where when you're a stock maker, you have all these different models that you have. Let's say you have 10 different models. But then within each of those models, you have different rifles that you have to build for. So Remington 700s, Tikkas, Savages, Ruger Americans, Browning X-Bolts, and the list goes on for about 15 major ones, right? So you have, let's say, our Phoenix model. Well, if I really wanted to capture every part of the market, I would have to build 15 molds just for the Phoenix, and then I'd have to build another 15 molds just for my next model. And there's just no way to do it. It's too expensive. Like I said, mold making and all that stuff is just, and even if you had all the money in the world, the amount of resources you could put, like molds take time to make. It takes time to develop and design a stock. So anyway, we felt like we had made a lot of progress in universalizing stocks from the old days at McMillan, where every stock was basically custom. But that last piece was, how do we make one model that fits all of the inlets? And so we are launching a full-blown universal mini chassis for all of our stocks, interchangeable. So when we launch, let's say we launch the Core, it'll be our first mini chassis stock in April. Then we launch the Renegade 2 in May. You'll be able to literally take your mini chassis out and switch them out. But the beauty is that we will have 10, 12 different mini chassis inlets. And so what that means is the inlets mean like you could buy a mini chassis inlet for a Remington 700 or any of its clones, for a Savage 110, for a Ruger American, for Winchesters. And for us, and ultimately for the customer, it makes life so much easier. we don't have to make all the molds. The options are available for the customer. So if they call in, I like that core stock, but I have a Tikka, it's available. Like right now, someone might call in or go to our website and they like a stock, but it's not available for what they have.
Mm-hmm.
So this helps with our customer base, like more options immediately. They don't even have. So the big thing for sales is they only have to know two things. What is my action? So is it a Remington? Is it a Winchester? And what's my caliber? That, if you know anything about making stocks or selling stocks, you know that's one of the hardest things to do is to make sure that you get the right information from the customer and that you end up making the right stock and it gets to the customer and it fits. All we need going forward is two things, your caliber and the make of your action. And it's right. It's really, really easy. So what this does too for the customer, for us, but also through distribution, when we go and we sell this product, let's say to like bigger retailers like Bass Pro we're talking to right now, they're interested because it's so much easier for them to sell a product when all you need to know is these two things, and you know that their rifle is going to fit. So it's exciting for us because it just makes the stock buying process for the customer so much easier. It's easier on our life, it's easier on the customer's life, and there's going to be so many more options for the customer when it comes down to it. And the interchangeability, so like you can buy one stock, and let's say you have 2 or 3 different action rifles that you want to put in it. You just buy the mini chassis for those. You buy a Remington mini chassis, a Tikka mini chassis, and they fit in the same stock. Or on the other hand, you like 2 or 3 different stocks, and you have one rifle, you want to switch them in and out. You buy your Remington 700 mini chassis, and you buy 3 or 4 different stocks, and you can just switch them out. And it's the interchangeability, the modularity, the ease of purchase. So nice. It's gonna be so nice.
I've been waiting for somebody to do it. We've talked about it forever. Like, there are so many SKUs out there to try and keep them all. To your point, like it's impossible for everybody. And it seems like when companies start to try and make everything, the quality goes down because they're trying to stretch their engineering and everything too thin. So, that's interesting. I'm gonna have to come take a look at it.
Yes, we're putting everything we have in the company towards that. We have been working on this now for, I would say, 6 months to a year, somewhere in that time frame. We are so optimistic about what it's going to bring, the ease of purchase for the customers, the amount of options the customer is going to have. There's like nothing else out there. And if anybody knows, has bought a stock in the past, it's complicated. It's complicated to know, like, especially if you know, like, if you have to know what your barrel contour is, like what's your shank length. Nobody knows what a shank length is, nor do they know how to measure it.
Right. And
so that's important to know as a stock maker. You need to know that. So taking all of that stuff out of the process of buying a product is going to be so nice for the customer. And the customer is going to end up getting the right product. How many times in the past where if you're building custom stocks and you send the wrong, it takes you 6 months to build it, and then you send the wrong stock out or the stock that doesn't fit, your customer's pissed off. Now you've just spent 6 months building the stock and it doesn't, you got to like trash it or try to find somewhere else to sell it. So working through that whole process, making the whole process simpler has been our goal from day one. And we're basically there.
Yeah, we get that call a lot at Straight Jacket. Like, people will call us and they're like, well, I need to know shank length in this McMillan. It's like, well, can't, I don't, how do you want me to measure this? Because I don't know what yours is going to be until I'm done with it.
Until you're done, yeah.
And it's been a struggle. So that's interesting and that's exciting. I mean, we've talked about it, as an industry, are we at our pinnacle? Have we grown as far as we can grow? And I still think there's a lot of growth. Bullets are being better. Products are being better. Barrels are getting better. Everything's getting tighter.
Yep.
So it's just one of those things that stock has to grow with everything else.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. And I don't know, I'll have to swing by and look at it.
Yeah.
So where can everybody find you?
Grayboe.com, GRAYBOE.com.
So what's the name behind Grayboe?
What's the name behind Grayboe?
Yeah, so where did you come up with the name?
Well, so McMillan was already taken, which is my last name. So I had to think of something else. My 2 sons are Gray and Bow. I have 4 kids, but my boys are Gray and Bow. And so, and I was able to secure the .com. This was back in like 2011 or even a long time ago. And so a 7-letter.com, Grayboe, which is the BOE is what helps the fact that I could get the .com, because usually if you were going to spell Grayboe, you'd spell it with just, BO or BOW.
Mm-hmm.
But the BOE is the uniqueness of it. And my son's name is spelled BOE. So it was great. And, it's been a great thing, having the more the time goes on, you realize, like, having your name, like grayboe.com, gives you a certain amount of, I think, to your customer, it gives you a certain amount of clout.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've been around and you're a more mature company. And so it just turned out that that's how it ended up. And I chose that. I mean, I got the .com long before we started the business. And then when we started the business, I'm like, I think this will fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just went with it.
It's different, and that's what attracts people. Everybody, we talked about it the other day, like, everybody ends their stuff with precision, or they end it with something, and it's just, it's different enough that it attracts everybody's attention.
Yeah.
The logo looks good. Everything looks good. I'm glad you guys are kicking ass. I mean, that's the thing, is there's a lot of great people in the industry, and there's some not so great ones, but it seems like the guys that are doing it right, they're treating people right. The dealers are getting treated correctly. They're growing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you stopping by. Go check out grayboe.com. I learned something today. Didn't know where the name come from. You
Mm-hmm.
guys probably just found out too. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'll come over and be on your podcast.
Cool. Can I plug my podcast too?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just started a podcast in October. It's called the Ryan McMillan Show. We talk a lot about Second Amendment, firearms, hunting, but we also do some other stuff. The reason why we called it Ryan McMillan Show is because, first of all, I needed it tied to Grayboe and stuff, but I also wanted to do a little bit more than just firearms and hunting stuff. So we talk about my military background, so I have military guys on there, law enforcement guys. We talk about some politics sometimes, and all kinds of different stuff. Just trying to get unique and interesting people on there with different perspectives. So we're on I think we are launching episode 18 coming up on Monday. We launch on Mondays. Go to Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, X. We have an Instagram. We have a TikTok.
You got an Apple Music
We
too?
got an Apple. Yep. And so just type in the Ryan McMillan Show, and you'll see it pop up, and just subscribe. And
I think you did that right, because I kind of took myself into a corner with just long range tactics. That's pretty much what everybody thinks is, it's only long range driven. Yeah. And I'm like, man, I kind of backed myself into a corner for that. So smart.
Well, and too, like, you could launch your podcast or rename your podcast with your name. And it's like, it's still tied to your business, right? Like, and that's kind of ultimately what I felt like, is having my name on it. People recognize the name from the company and from, McMillan days, but also it's tied to Grayboe anyway. So but it didn't limit me to just doing that. I could do some other stuff. And so I think it's been a good decision. Originally, it wasn't the Ryan McMillan Show. We were going to call it something else. And kind of right before we launched, I thought to myself, I'm like, I just don't feel right about this. It needs to have, like, a podcast is about the people doing the podcast. Right. And so it needs to have an identity, like a person's name, I feel like, that you can connect with directly. And so even though I don't really care much about, I'm not in it to try to be well known or anything like that. But the name is, it's a good way to connect, the person doing the podcast, me, and then I have Steve, with everything else. So anyway, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at Sean Ryan, if you look at Joe Rogan, if you look at these guys, like, that's why people listen, because they like him. They like the way that they can take interviews and everything else, and they do a phenomenal job at it. Yeah. So good luck to you. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It seems like everybody's starting to podcast, but only a few people have a really good podcast. And I think, I was looking, I started geeking on one of yours the other day. I started zooming in on your equipment and everything, and I'm like, people don't understand, to start a really good podcast, you gotta spend some money on some equipment. Yeah. So
it costs us about $20,000.
Judas.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not there yet.
We I think I felt pretty good about that, because I've seen some podcasts that get set up and they're a lot more than that. We did everything as cheap as we could, but we knew we needed to have a high, we wouldn't be successful unless we had high quality, audio and cameras, and we needed the right setting and environment. So I'm pretty happy with it, but yeah, it's not cheap. I mean, you can't just, I mean, you could, I guess, if you just wanted to, you could start, simpler, but we just felt like where we were at with Grayboe, Grayboe's a little more established company. we needed to rise to that level. Like we didn't need it. We needed it to be the same level that Grayboe was. Like we couldn't just enter and just have us doing it, in a different way. We needed to really have a good presence at first. So
yeah, well, that's good. Good luck, man. And I appreciate you coming on the show.
thanks, Cole.
Thanks, dude.
Thanks, buddy.